Hello, and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. You can really help the show reach more loss and infertility families by taking a moment to leave a positive review or rating on Apple or Spotify. You can also check out more information about the episode in the show notes at journeyforjasmine.com. In this episode, I talk with Cheri Bergeron, who is the author of Mission Motherhood and founder of the nonprofit Cheri's Choice. She spent 10 years going through IVF, TFMR, and infant loss on her journey to becoming a single mother by choice. Cheri talks about the babies she lost, the challenges she faced, and how she now helps other women who are navigating similar decisions. Hello, everyone. Today I am here with Cheri Bergeron. Can you tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah, sure, I can. Well, for one, thanks so much for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to your audience and share. I have been a tech executive for about 30 years, and in the middle of that, I really decided that I wanted to become a mother, but I felt very powerless to make that happen. And a big part of that for me was struggling to find the right person that I wanted to have children with. And ultimately, I came to a decision there, maybe not the best decision, but then as I wanted to actually try to become a mother, I faced a 10-year infertility struggle. And it was something that involved multiple fertility treatments, donor conception, genetic defects, child loss, all kinds of challenges. And I was ultimately able to get my children at the ages of 44 and almost 47. So I was able to achieve the family that I wanted. And now I wrote a book and I have a nonprofit to help other women find their path to motherhood and claim motherhood on their own terms.
Wow, I mean, it's quite a story of everything that you have gone through. And I mean, and so many people, going through 10 years of it would have wanted to just give up. So what kept you going? What kept you motivated to not give up on that end goal?
I like to say I think God made me pretty stubborn, persistent. I will say if there are career women on the call, there are a lot of qualities that make us successful in our career that actually make us successful in our journey to motherhood too. I was firmly rooted in my purpose. I knew that motherhood was very important to me, that I felt that there was a lot of fulfillment to come from that would go beyond the work that I was doing. I knew that my job, what I was doing there, wasn't going to save the world. It wasn't going to really matter after a number of weeks and months. And I felt that motherhood would really create a generational impact. And so the perseverance and the resourcefulness and all of those qualities that kind of made me successful in my career was exactly what I needed to, go on this 10-year journey to become a mother.
So I feel like a lot of the qualities that you talk about that also, translate well into, wanting to push for that goal are the qualities that a lot of women get criticized for having. Is that something that you ever have dealt with?
Oh, so much. So much. I mean, how many of us who are strong women have been told we're too much, tone it down, or, you're too bold. And it's funny because I was just writing a post on Bozoma St. John today, who is kind of the epitome of this unapologetically herself and bold and beautiful and speaking her truth. And I think that you're right. We think of motherhood as being this frilly, flowery kind of thing, but sometimes when we're really going through a difficult journey, I'm sorry, but we have to be fierce. And we have to be, fierce in what we want, fierce in advocating for ourselves, fierce in protecting our children. Motherhood is not for the weak. It really requires a lot of courage. And so I think that the kind of personality I had was just right.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, nothing gets me more amped up or, than trying to protect my kids or doing something to, that's on their behalf. I'm like, okay, for me, maybe I'll let you walk on me, but not them, not them.
There's a reason why they call it Mama Bear, I'll tell you that. And so you're right. But those are those same qualities that made us successful in our career that I think we need to be great mothers.
So what do you think is the biggest myth about motherhood?
Well, for me, the biggest myth was that it would come easily or just naturally evolve. And so, the home that I was raised in was a traditional family. Mom had her kids in her 20s, and it was something that I kind of bought into, which was that you'll just, focus on your career, you'll just meet the right person, and then you'll magically have a family and you'll live happily ever after. But it didn't happen for me that way. And I didn't have the resources at the time to understand that there were other models, other paths to motherhood. And so that's really why I'm on the journey that I am, because I felt that I had to be married in order to become a mother. That was one big myth that I had. And, the fact is, we all have our own individual journeys to motherhood. So, one of those big ones is that you have to be married, and that there our models for family are much bigger today. And I think we need to be aware that there are multiple ways to create a beautiful family. It's not a one size fits all fairy tale.
Yes, definitely agree there. And also that one way is not better than the other. I mean, there's no like, this is the right way and these are just the other ways. They're all equally valid ways of having a family.
That's true. And our society, though, still doesn't appreciate that. And so I think we need to recognize, and sometimes even our families don't support that. So I think it's really important to be very rooted in why you want to become a mother and what is the right path for you.
Was there a certain turning point or moment where you felt like, okay, this is when I'm going to take the path forward to being a single mother by choice?
Yes, and it's not one that you design out. As I said, it's really not in the books, the fairy tales. But I married someone who looked good on paper because my biological clock was ticking very loudly, and I felt that that was the rite of passage that I needed. And we started to do life together, and I realized that we weren't compatible in terms of our priorities and our decisions. And so, as life happens, then you say, is this the person that I want to have kids with? Is this the person I want to be the father of my children? And so, I think when you have loss, then it's even worse because that creates a tremendous amount of emotional pain, and people deal with that in different ways, and some people don't know how to deal with it at all. And so I think if you've had issues, then loss is sort of the epitome of that tension. And so for us, it was. And he was going to make some decisions that really showed that we weren't on the same page in terms of the kind of parents we wanted to be. And so that's when I really had this moment of saying, I'm going to become a mother with or without you. And it looks like it's going to be without you. And so that's really how I headed down my path.
And so I know you also have a nonprofit that helps other women that are kind of navigating these same thoughts and issues. So what inspired you to start that, and how do you help other women make these choices?
Well, I went into this whole journey with a real lack of information, kind of blindly. And I didn't want other women to have to go through that. I didn't even fully understand what my fertility timeline was because I heard all the messages in our society that said, hey, don't worry about it. Medical science will be there. You see all the headlines of celebrities having babies in their 40s, sometimes even in their 50s. And so when I went to the fertility doctor at 40, I was shocked to learn that my prospects of having a child without a lot of medical intervention were very slim. And I was like, how did I not get the memo on that? I'm intelligent. I can plan. I realized that I didn't create a plan for motherhood and I didn't know what all my options were. And so Cherie's Choice is really about making sure that no other woman is in that situation. So we provide education and we provide workshops and things that will help women decide on their priorities, explore paths to motherhood, and move forward with clarity and confidence and choice.
I think that goes along with what you were saying earlier that, we think motherhood is just a guarantee. Like okay, I'm ready now, so it's just going to come to me when I'm ready. And that then we find out, oh, wait, that's not how it happens for a lot of us. So I really love that
Right.
you are helping other women navigate this.
And for so many years, we're actually counseled not to get pregnant. So, I mean, our mindset when we're young women is don't have an unplanned pregnancy, whatever you do. And we're taught this from a very young age. And then it really becomes kind of difficult to flip the switch and say, okay, now is the perfect time. There are actually things we can even do to prepare for motherhood, like get a fertility assessment and things like that before we're even thinking seriously about having children. There are things we can do to prepare. And so that's a part of the mission of Cheri's Choice too.
So I know that you were also involved in a court case. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and the custody battle and all of those outdated laws that we probably don't
Oh
know anything
gosh.
about?
Yeah. I mean, it seems like a bit of an edge case, but the fact is that the husband that I had, we started in our IVF process together. And that moment that you talked about, which was the break moment, was where I determined that we weren't aligned. And it was because he said, I don't want to have anything to do with any children if we aren't together. And so he signed papers to this effect and such. And so I moved forward with a pregnancy, and there was some loss in that, which we haven't talked about yet. But just to tell you the timeline, after that experience, I decided to have a child on my own using an anonymous sperm donor. And through the course of things, he actually changed his mind and decided that he wanted to be a part of the daughter's life that of the child that I had. And so we were co-parenting my daughter. Her name's Lauren. And as we moved forward and I decided to go and have a child on my own using a sperm donor, I ended up having a son. And about 7 years after we legally separated, he reversed his position and tried to become my son's legal father when he had not been in a fatherly role and was not the biological father and had had no role in bringing him, he wasn't a part of the fertility process or anything. The reason why that was possible is because we we're still legally married. And so the laws are called presumed father laws. And they're somewhat outdated with the way that our modern life is, but it assumes that if a child is born and you're still legally married, then of course that man is the father. But in today's world, that isn't always true. And so it took me 6 months and $250,000 to protect my son from that. So, it really think at the heart of it was the question, does a woman have the right to pursue an independent pregnancy? you know is that a right that a woman has? And that was a big part of the argument, was that because I was legally married, even though we were living separate lives, he had a girlfriend, we're not living together, or we're not together in any way, what did that somehow prevent me or disqualify me from being able to pursue my own pregnancy, which sounds crazy. And it was crazy. But fortunately, we were able to win that court case. And so one of the missions of Cheri's Choice is to get those laws changed.
That's what I was about to ask. Did it change any laws or are they still the same and you just won your particular case?
It was a precedent-setting case, so it becomes part of Texas law from that perspective. But really, women are still at risk. And I do say to women who are married, or even if they are in a situation where you're living with someone, you allow them to provide support. The child calls them daddy and things like that. That can create sticky legal situations that women need to be aware of. So if anybody has any questions about that, you can reach out to me about it. So I think the laws really need to become much more clear, but that was
I'm
my
also in Texas, so Texas is not at the forefront of women's health
no.
and laws, so I'm always interested to hear about stuff that's happening in the state.
Yes, yes, but presumed father laws exist in every state. And so it's not just Texas that has this particular struggle. So I think we just need to have the laws clarified. So that is definitely on my to-do list. But I'm also really feeling a sense of urgency to help women understand what their options are so that they can become mothers in the way that feels right to them.
And you've also written a book as well, right? Mission Motherhood.
Well, that's the book about my fertility journey. And I really wanted to provide something that was a very real and raw account of what that feels like. And really to let women know that they aren't alone in that struggle, but also to guide them on some decisions that I wish I might have made different choices. And so there are a number of things expressed about that in the book.
And I know you mentioned going through loss. Do you mind talking a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, no, and by the way, I've done a lot of therapy that kind of enables me to be able to talk about that. I thought that was really important to do that work so that I could really share the story to help others. So on the IVF journey and being 40 when I started, I became aware that the quality of my eggs weren't very good and that that could create concerns about the health of a child. So I decided to use an egg donor. And I was very surprised. For one, I didn't know anything about egg donors. I knew about sperm donors, but egg donors I had never heard of. And I learned that if I used the eggs of a younger donor, say a 25-year-old or a 27-year-old, that my odds of having a healthy pregnancy were right about the same as hers. And so that was mind blowing to me. I didn't know that even in my 40s that would be possible. And so I decided to go that path. And at the time I was with my now ex-husband, and so we used his sperm and we had a pregnancy, and it was a single child. And at about the 5 month sonogram, we got word that she had a very debilitating case of spina bifida that was not compatible with life. And so, at the advice of doctors and understanding what that process would be like, given how severe it was at the time, I elected to do a medical termination. And that was brutal. I mean, it was one of the worst things in my life because this child was so wanted. And I thought, I'd always thought these procedures were, you know, 16-year-old girls who didn't want to take responsibility for their actions and things like that, and not that I would actually have to be a participant in protecting my daughter in this way. And so that, that was something that we went through. And then as we were separating, I implanted two embryos. It was a boy and a girl. The girl has now become my daughter, Lauren, who's wonderful, healthy, and everything. But the son lived for 19 days and he had another genetic condition where his lungs didn't develop fully. And so I had to watch him suffer for 19 long days. And he had a ventilator breathing for him and things. And, I just was like, why? How is this possible? I went to all of these lengths to, I was concerned about my genetics. So I was concerned, about that. How is this happening? And it turns out, we found out with my son that this was an undiagnosed genetic defect on my ex-husband's side. And the fact is that while the fertility clinics test the woman, they often don't test the man. And so they hadn't felt it was necessary to test him because there was no known family history. And, that genetic test probably would have cost about $3,000. My son's medical bills were $750,000. And not to mention the more significant part, which was the agony that we went through and that he went through. So that's really one of my big messages from my losses is if you go the route of IVF, please test the man because you need to know that information. And it may not be a common situation, but in my case, two children lost their lives because a $3,000 test wasn't done.
So they were both with the same condition then?
They had different conditions, but due to the same genetic defect, it manifested differently in each of the two children. So that's why after the first one, they didn't know it was sort of undiagnosed. And the interesting thing is they had us consult with a genetic counselor and I asked, do we need to get my husband tested? And she said, I don't think that would make any difference. And so,
Like,
and so I think it's just really important to know that the genetic counselors and the well-meaning people at the fertility clinic, there just maybe are some blind spots that they didn't see because I don't think there was any intention of misleading. But the fact is that the man should be tested just along with the women because there's so much going into this. How could you not know that? So that was one of my big takeaways.
yeah, that is just crazy to me. I mean, he's literally half of the DNA that is going into that baby. Why would people think
Correct.
that that is not important? I feel like it's still just placing the blame on the moms. Like every issue is somehow the mom's fault. It can't be the dad, you know?
Exactly. And you know what? It may be statistically less common, but the fact is, if it's a possibility, then wasn't it worth taking this test? But you bring up a really good point. Infertility is often thought to be just a woman's issue. But as I've done some of the research, 40% of infertility cases are from the man. And so, there is a lot of bias towards it being all the woman's responsibility. It's just simply not true.
Yeah, and once you've been part of that small percentage, like we lost our daughter Jasmine. She was stillborn at 32 weeks, and she had also a rare condition called a congenital diaphragmatic hernia, and then she also had mosaic trisomy 15, so both pretty rare things. And they told me after meeting with a genetic counselor, it was just a fluke thing that happened, a less than 1% chance of it happening. But then that really changes your perspective on percentages and things because once you're part of that really tiny group, it's like, why aren't we testing everybody for this? Like, why are we letting anybody go through this?
Right. That's right. And when I looked at the odds of the disorder that my daughter had, and then the odds of the disorder that my son had, and then putting those into the same family, the odds were in the trillionths.
Wow.
And so that's how I knew it was like, this is not a coincidence. Because if it was, I would have won the lottery about 5 times over. And so, it really was truly a blessing that my son lived long enough that we could get a genetic test done for him, which we couldn't do for my daughter, and get the answers why.
Before you went through this infertility and loss, did you really know many other people who had gone through it?
I knew my daughter-in-law had a loss, but it's not something that we talk about very much. And I think it's something I'm glad people are talking about it more. There are a number of celebrities who have come out and shared it because it's far more common than we realize. And people don't always know how to deal with it in terms of, do I how do I mourn this loss? And so often it's kind of brushed under the rug and said, oh, well, you'll get pregnant again, or this just push forward. Let's just move forward. And the fact is, this was a precious life. And this was our hopes and our dreams for this child. And that child deserves to be honored. And each person has to decide what the right approach is. I'm not here to prescribe anything, but for me, each of those children's lives needed to be recognized and needed to be remembered. And we've done that.
Do you do anything special for them each year or anything for their birthdays or holidays or anything like that?
I have some memorial stones that we put in place for them. And, there's a ritual to go and see them and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think people who haven't been through loss, they can't fully understand what it's like to lose a child. And, it's a lifelong thing. It's not oh, it's been a year, like I'm over it. It's lifelong grief.
It is. And the other thing we do is for my daughter, my first daughter, Rachel, we celebrate the day I celebrate the day that I found out I was pregnant with her. So I don't celebrate kind of the end, I celebrate the beginning. And I think each person finds their own ways to create a memory or a ritual around that. I think it's very important.
Yeah. So if you could go back and give yourself any advice, what do you think you would tell your younger self?
Oh my goodness. Well, I would let my younger self know a few things. One, I would freeze my eggs, which was not something that was really available to me at the time. I think I would say let love find you in its own time. And sometimes the path to motherhood and the path to partnership don't come in the right order. And sometimes we have to, do things a little differently in order to have the right answer for ourselves. I would let myself know that I could have permission to do that because I think that would have spared me and my children a lot of pain if we had done it that way. The other thing is, of course, test the man. That's my other big one. And I would consider if you are thinking about doing motherhood on your own and you're still legally married, maybe prioritize getting that final paperwork because that can just make things a lot cleaner at the end of the day. So those are some of the advice that I provide in the book.
So if they're not legally married, then they can't make that claim. It's only if you're still married.
Yeah, there's other claims that they can make. Certainly, if you've involved a man in your child's life, if the court can determine that it would be against the child's best interest to remove that relationship because they're seriously bonded, then that person can request visitation rights. So they can't necessarily be made the legal parent, perhaps, in that case, if there's like a known father. In my case, the vulnerability was because I'd used an anonymous sperm donor. So I couldn't point to someone and say, that's the father right there, because if I could have, then that would not be a legal means. So it's really, as I said, a fairly specific case, but something that needs to be changed.
I'm curious. I mean, you can't just, I mean, I know it's not this simple, but you couldn't just show paperwork that you that you went that route, they don't.
Yeah, so again, there's this law that says that if he could prove that he had been in a fatherly role, then the court could actually deny a DNA test, which is kind of crazy to think that you could deny a DNA test, but it's really about what would be best for the child. Now, it took me 6 months to prove what was kind of obvious because he hadn't lived with them, he hadn't taken part in anything. It took 6 months for me to get that story out, and I had to surrender my son for visitation for those 6 months with him. And so that was, really the hardest part was because he could claim that he was the husband that, I would have to give my son over to him.
Yeah, it's just, I'm trying to get my head straight around, everything that's involved in that because,
I know.
it in when talking about it, it seems like it should be so clear cut. Like, here's the paperwork showing you're not. Like, but he just says he is, and it starts this whole like snowball.
But the court ultimately had to accept my petition for a DNA test. That was, because that's sort of the first thing you think. Well, if you think you're the father, then let's do this thing. And that was the whole process to actually try to deny the DNA test.
Wow. Yeah, that is so much to go through. And your
It is.
poor son who was probably
Four,
confused and,
four at
like
the time. And
I
yeah.
don't know what's happening.
And again, it really further reinforced this idea that we weren't aligned on what parenthood means because and a lot of people have questioned what the motives are, and I really can't speak to that because he hasn't, I mean, he hasn't really shared the why, but so I'm left to think about the various options. But I think going back to what I could learn from it, had I not kind of forced this relationship that wasn't truly built on the right foundation, then I wouldn't have created this situation for myself. It turned out that I sort of picked about the worst person I possibly could have with all of the pieces in it. So I would have been much stronger if I had gone through with having my children on my own terms and then allowing the right relationship to come to me at its right time.
Yeah, like we talked about, we're just stuck in that narrative that it has to be you meet the right person, then you have kids. It can't be the other way around, or you can't just have kids and not ever meet that person, or.
Right. It's right. But I think in that case, I think we really have to go back to fundamentals of the quality of the relationship, not fundamentals in terms of traditional values necessarily, because the idea that every marriage is a happy marriage, we know is not real life. And even our parents and our grandparents' relationships, everything wasn't rosy in that case. And I think if we focus on what it takes to make a good partnership and have the kind of bond that would be appropriate to create a family, I think we would be probably having a lot fewer divorces, a lot more intact families, and a lot of happier children. But if you can't find that and you're committed to being a parent, you have the right to do that.
So if there's somebody listening right now who's struggling with infertility or wanting to, think about being a parent on their own, do you have any like encouraging words to give them?
Well, I mean, one, I just wish I could reach through the computer and give you a hug. I mean, I'm sending all of my love and support to you. I just want to say that if you believe it's your purpose to become a mother, I absolutely believe you can make that happen. And I'm wanting to encourage you with that today. It may not look quite the way you imagined. And that is something that we have to work through and process and maybe even grieve because we thought our lives might be different. But it can still be beautiful. And I want to give you courage because we never know what the right path is. And I just have to believe that if you follow that path with the intention of love, then your children are going to find you, the ones you were meant to have.
I love that message. It's so true. I mean, whether you end up having them on your own, fostering, adopting, surrogacy, I mean, all of it, I think in the end, it may not look like what we want, but it's the way, not that it was necessarily supposed to happen, but the way it did happen. So if that
It's
makes sense.
true and it's real and it's beautiful. And so it's no less beautiful just because it's not traditional.
So if people were interested in buying your book or learning more about your nonprofit, where would they go for that?
Amazon has the book. I think I'll be happy to share the link with you. CheriBergeron.com is my author website, and Cheri'sChoice.com is the nonprofit. You can reach me through any of those vehicles, or I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all the things. So I hope you'll reach out because at this time in my life, my big mission is to help other women on their paths to motherhood. And so I measure my success in babies. So, please reach out. Let me help. I'm
Is
happy
there
to.
anything else that you want to share or add?
No, I just honor whatever your own journey is and realize, I think as women, a couple things. Infertility is very isolating. So please, reach out to someone. Sometimes family and friends aren't even the best support because maybe they didn't go through it. Maybe they have children of their own and things. And so they may not be the best people to support you. There's a lot of resources on Cheri's Choice about different support groups and therapists and things like that. Be kind to yourself because so often we are very critical of ourselves as women to be going through infertility. What's wrong with us? Is this about the choices that we made or things like that? And I think we need to give ourselves some grace and understand that we still can become mothers and we just need to follow where the path leads.
Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us today.
Well, Sarah, thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure meeting you. I look forward to hearing about your stories.
Thank you so much, Cheri, for sharing your story with us. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a positive review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.